Hey guys, thanks for joining. Today we're going to do a case study of how we took one of our clients and took their cold ROAS to over 5x in 60 days. So let's jump into it and get started. So in terms of the outcome of the case study, what we did was we essentially doubled the ROAS, taking it over 5x within 60 days for cold audiences, specifically on Meta. This is one of those things that is really difficult to do because brands that are trying to scale, they use up their warm audience first, and then they have a hard time getting past the cold audience and getting the ROAS up on that cold audience, right? Because this is where you're acquiring new customers. So we made it much more attractive to bring in the new customers for this client. And getting a high ROAS on those cold audiences is just one of the hardest things to do in e-commerce. This is where you might see like a ton of great case studies out there where they're showing unbelievably high ROAS. And in a lot of cases, one of the things that, you're not necessarily seeing is that this is for a large warm audience. And we just know that's not scalable, right? So once you exhaust that warm audience, it's going to be much harder to achieve that high ROAS on new customer growth. And this is exactly one of the reasons why when you see brands increasing their media budgets, ROAS declining over time, because they can't figure out that cold ROAS piece. So with this case study, I'm hoping to show you exactly the steps we took to address those specific underlying issues that allowed us to scale the ROAS past 5x. Really quick introduction on myself. I'm the CMO and agency owner at FiberTribe. This is going to be my 12th year in digital marketing. I've worked with e-com brands for close to 10 years and worked with over 300 brands at this point. So, my team's seen a ton of success with apparel and footwear. So in the last couple of years, we've really niched down in this area to become experts in this specific niche. And one of the things that makes us unique in this space is that we have, a much higher success rate with our graduated scaling method. And you can see that in one of our other videos. I'm not going to get too deep into the GSM model today, but just wanted to give you a quick intro on who I am. And in terms of what we're going to be going through today, so there's kind of 6 sections that we're going to be going over in roughly 20 minutes or so here. First, I'm going to show you, I want to talk a little bit about, what's changed in e-commerce, in 2024. 3 major problems that apparel and footwear brands are having. I'm going to very briefly go over the graduated scaling method. And then also I'm going to talk about our GSM audit, GSM standing for graduated scaling method. This is how we identify a lot of the issues that the brands need to fix in their scaling. I'm going to go over what are the areas that we did fix and how we did that, and I'll show you some of the results. So if you guys have any questions, you can always DM me on LinkedIn. Or send me a DM on Instagram, or just send me an email at ricky@fibertribe.io. So in terms of then versus now, those of us that have been in the space for several years, will recognize that 2024 is a very different year from, going back to like 2020. We know that Meta used to be just a money printing machine, right? In terms of e-commerce stores, you could launch an e-commerce store overnight and instantly scale it with, the right product. There's a ton of these, one product stores that really don't exist anymore today. And that's because brands have become so much more competitive and sophisticated. And the market itself also is not as attractive in terms of acquiring those new customers. So, there's still a ton of opportunity to win in 2024. There's lots of brands that are winning, but we see that most brands are stagnating a lot more this year because the market is just tougher. There's lower disposable income. People are not just they're not impulse buying the way that they used to. So this is where not only are we having more competition in the market for that disposable income, but also the competition has just become way more savvy in terms of the tactics, in terms of the volume of what they're doing. Just to maintain those top positions in terms of acquisition in the market. The other thing is it's much harder for young brands to enter the market now because there is this giant moat between those established brands that have their customer databases, that have their data dialed in, and the young brands that don't have the, the profitable piece of their business that would come from having a large customer database. They haven't had that established yet. And so they're completely relying on getting a good ROAS on their cold acquisition, on their cold funnels. And if they're not doing that, then they're growing kind of organically through content and social. So much harder, a lot more work, and much harder for new brands to break into the market and grow these days. And for established brands, they're looking for those cost efficiencies to, achieve their higher levels of profit and growth. This year, this is one of the biggest messages that we're seeing amongst all the brands that we're talking to, especially the larger ones, is how do we get cost efficiencies? How do we decrease our MER? How do we find ways of scaling, but at a more profitable level? When it comes to apparel and footwear brands in general, there's three big problems that they're facing. So one of them is not having the right approach to acquire new customers at a profit. So generally what we're seeing is there's lower quality audiences. They're discounting too much to get sales, which means they're going to lower their perceived value in the market. And then they might be milking their existing customers over time. And so those existing audiences are getting depleted and they're not buying as much unless you're constantly introducing, new products. I mean, there's lots of ways to address this, but this is one of the biggest challenges for brands in the space, is not having the right approach to acquire those new customers at a profit. And not positioning the brand as high perceived value. So, lower conversion rate, lower AOV, higher cost of acquisition, and low repeat purchase. Those are kind of the outcomes of not having high perceived value. We talk a lot about, product market fit. And, if you don't have an incredible product with high value, it's going to be really hard to convert people. It's going to be really hard to have your a high average order value. And you're going to have a higher acquisition cost because of those higher conversion rates, right? So, and to have that repeat purchase, we need to make sure that customers are seeing the value in those products. So, we're also seeing a lot less of these kind of like drop shipping, low value products in the market because people have figured out they're just low value, low perceived value. And this is why, branding in e-commerce space has become such a strong point to leverage. And then the other one is unsure how to scale revenue without forcing it. So, a lot of brands are spending a lot of money on their media, on Meta, on TikTok, etc. But they're kind of like piling it all into one space. They're trying to do, like vertical scaling as opposed to spreading it out across channels and spreading it out over, selling different products, and selling their products in different ways, which is what we call horizontal scaling, is spreading that media out. Vertical scaling is generally much less successful. If you have an incredibly high perceived value, a really amazing offer, yes, you can vertically scale, but generally speaking, you're better off launching kind of a new funnel and a new campaign. And also lower profit by not scaling at the right time. So, a lot of brands we talk to, they're just like, we have to hit this specific number in this specific month. And so they're forcing themselves to, scale their campaigns before they're ready to do that. Like, you have to have your KPIs in place. You have to make sure that you're ready for that scale. Otherwise it's going to be insanely unprofitable, So you got to make sure you're doing the scale at the right time and not just like, okay, well, we have to, so we're just going to throw money at it. You're going to make things harder on yourself. You're going to spend more money. You're going to get less profit. And you're going to have to fulfill way more orders. The methodology that we use at Fibertribe is the graduated scaling method. I'll go over this really briefly. I have other videos and another webinar that goes into this in more depth. But basically, there's 5 major sections to it. There's product optimization, marketing systems, new customer acquisition, customer retention, and then scaling profitably. So, you could see it's kind of, this is why it's called the graduated scaling method because it's kind of in steps. Like you wouldn't try to, roll out your marketing systems and try to acquire new customers if you don't already have a product market fit. So, those are the things that are essential to do in the right order. We see a lot of people trying to, jump from like step 1 to step 5, where they are, okay, we've got a product in the market. Now let's immediately try and scale so that we can get our economies of scale. But that's just not how it works. What's going to happen is, again, unless you're lucky and you have like an incredible market fit, an incredible offer, that could potentially scale quickly. But in 9 out of 10 cases, we just don't see that working. So, you got to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. Where people tend to, where brands start to pump out the most profit is in this customer retention section of the GSM. So, if you've got your acquisition systems figured out and you're really growing your email lists, you're going to get a much lower cost of acquisition here. This is where your MER is going to drop. But once you have these first 4 systems, kind of completed and they're all running efficiently, continuing to scale, there's lots of unique challenges with that. So this is why we have a full section on how do you actually scale profitably beyond those initial sales. Like if you're doing 100K and it's consistent and you want to scale from 100K a month to $1 million a month, it's not as simple as just like let's throw more media at it. Generally, sometimes that works. Okay, so in terms of the GSM audit, so we've taken our graduated scaling method and we've broken it apart into, all of those different pieces that you saw in there. And so we look at every single one of those and audit, where is the brand in terms of the full system. So this brand that we were working with, we found that media spend was too high in some low performing areas. So they just weren't scaling efficiently. They were way overspending in areas that weren't actually contributing to the revenue. And we see this all the time with overspending on like branded terms, overspending on your warm audiences, things that are not driving incremental profits and new customers. So we had to basically dial back their media spend. We managed to dial back the media spend significantly and still retain the most of their sales, but just spending way less to do that. The creative tests they were running weren't driving any real insight. So that was something where we actually ended up paring back a lot of their creative tests because it was just like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Low ROAS on majority of campaigns. So the campaigns were profitable, but barely. So there wasn't really any room to scale it up. And the Meta and Google ad accounts need to be restructured. They were just following, a bit of an older methodology, way too many campaigns. It wasn't efficiently utilizing the media budget. And then also not fully leveraging organic and UGC social content. So that was a big missing piece that we reintroduced. Fun fact, there's a huge opportunity with engagement campaigns that almost nobody utilizes. And that's why there's so low cost because very few people everybody's getting into the auctions for the conversion campaigns because, obviously that's what everybody wants and for good reason, right? That's the majority of what we use as well. But there is a huge opportunity in some of these other auctions that are lower cost because nobody's using them. And so you can get some incredible, awareness and engagement. And those should be things that you're looking at in addition to, the conversion campaigns, of course. So areas that we fixed in the first 30 days, we consulted with them on their brand positioning and perceived value. So, those are always areas that we can't fix, but we can consult on. Those are areas that the brand has to fix in terms of, bringing up the AOV, bringing up the conversion rate. So those are all different areas that we looked at across the product market fit, the brand, the website. And then we reduced the number of creative tests. So there was just way too much going on and there was no rhyme or reason to what was working, what wasn't. So we reduced those creative tests. We helped build out a new marketing calendar for the marketing system with promotions and UGC involved in that. And then we did restructure the Meta and Google ad accounts, and we did reduce their media spend quite a bit. I would say by at least 30% in this case. And as I mentioned before, there was very little impact to the actual revenue because of where we were scaling back the media spend. Areas that we fixed. So in the 30, so this would be in the second month, we implemented AI generated dynamic creatives for catalog DPAs. So this is where, you've got your boring old catalog DPAs, which are highly effective in terms of the ROAS, but just with a white background, very boring. So we improved those by about, I think it was a 47% improvement by using AI generated dynamic templates. So this would be things like showing your, how many reviews the product has. It would be like showing for apparel, like rather than just like the one image that's pulling off the site directly, you'd have like the front of the article of clothing, and then the back, and maybe a side view. And you could do the same thing like with footwear as well. So showing like the different angles of the product. And then we also launched some new cold campaigns with AI powered audiences. So that was one of the biggest things that contributed to the lift in the ROAS was these new cold campaigns with AI powered audiences. We implemented social engagement ads, and then we also implemented feed triggers for the data feed. So you can use tools like Data Feed Watch, Go Data Feed, and implement triggers around things like product availability, things where, for example, if your product is low in stock, obviously if it's not in stock, it's not going to run in the catalog. But if it's low in stock, it's going to have a low conversion rate. So you probably don't want that showing up in your ads as well. So those sorts of, smaller adjustments and automated triggers really help with increasing your ROAS. And then in terms of results, the outcome, so this is after 60 days, you could see initially average ROAS was 1.91, with the best performing campaign being around 3.8, some of them being quite low when we took over this account. And then, we ended up lowering MER from over 30% to under 15%. And then the AROAS increased it to 5.17 on their top performing. This is a cold campaign. This is purely cold audiences right here. So even higher performing than some of the warm audiences. And you can see, so not not a 5x across the board, but you can see this is where the largest campaign where we spent the most money. This was, some of these campaigns are going away as well, so we can focus on the big ones with the best ROAS, but also you have to always have some creative tests happening. So it doesn't make sense to just have one single campaign all the time, right? Okay, if you guys have any questions on this case study or how we did any of this, feel free to, again, DM me on LinkedIn, follow me there, or send me an email. I'd be happy to walk through further details if you guys want. All right, thanks.